All right, so what does it mean to be more dynamic in your thinking, in your understanding, in your actions, all of that? Which, I mean, it's definitely better to be dynamic than static in just about all of that. And what I mean by that is, especially in regards to tech and computer science, I mean, the only constant is you constantly learn or realize that there's a lot that you don't know. I mean, and it gets to the point where you just get used to it. I mean, the more you study something, the more you're like, oh, well, this rabbit hole goes really deep, and that's a very common phrase you'll hear in computer science is like, how deep does the rabbit hole go? Or I just went on a huge or down a rabbit hole with that, because you get to explaining something, and then it's like, okay, well, to understand that, you really need to understand what's before this, or, some other information. And then by the time you get all said and done, it's like, okay, well, you might as well just know the whole system in and out, or that's what it feels like sometimes. But anyways, dynamic as like compared or when applied to other things too, not just tech or not just computer science, but like a good example was yesterday I was driving home and I needed to make a right-hand turn, and the way that construction was, I had to be in the left lane to make the right-hand turn. Usually everybody that's turning just, goes in the right lane, and all the faster people go in the left, as most normal streets. But, with road construction, it lasted for one day where they had it blocked off just before where, and the lane goes down to a one lane anyway. So it's generally known for people that are like used to the area that only the people that are turning or the people trying to drive like jerks and pass everybody on the right, make it to the head of the line because they either didn't realize that the lane was going down or, you know. Anyways, I digress, but it is generally known that like that's what it is. So it feels really bad like being in the left lane just to make that right turn. So today it had changed. It was back to being you were in the right lane to turn, left lane if you're actually like, through traffic trying to go. So just within a day, I thought I had the traffic pattern figured out, and that's why it's important, is because, I'm pretty used to that route. I've been living here for a few years, like, I know the way, and this is the way. I've been watching a lot of Mando, but anyways, I digress. But this is important because I had seen a change, and so I made note of that change, and I tried to do it, and then I was like, well, let's just see. And I even kind of looked ahead, and I kind of noticed it ahead of time because I was skeptical of it. I was like, no way would they like, or if they had to have that sign at that spot, either someone would have told them that it was an inconvenient spot, or they would have finished the construction in order to not make that, because it is such a hazard, because you do get a mixture of people, especially like people that aren't familiar with that street. They're like, oh, I didn't know the lane ends, now I'm in trouble, I have to merge, and that doesn't always go too well. So anyways, and then dynamic. I said tech in the beginning because that is like one of the biggest reasons I've noticed it is like I like to tell people I have my own facepalm moments just about every day, and it's true. Like, I sometimes I'll look too closely at a problem and I won't even realize like a simple solution or something, or overthinking, or or it's not relevant. And especially when dealing with tech, that's why any IT thing, like if they're trying to help you with your issue, the first thing is to like, okay, clarify it, get it narrowed down as much as possible without causing too much stress to the user, like what's really going on. And then, they explain so much, and then you start troubleshooting. You kind of get like a shotgun down to like a general idea. And then the dynamic part of it is, even if you learn a tool or a platform or a software or whatever, like it can change at a moment's notice. Like the software vendors can come out with a thing that says, oh, now it works like this, or oh, now you need to do this. And usually they're pretty good about not making monumental changes, but at the same time change is, well, constant. And it's kind of like a turn of phrase, or there's a lot of phrases out there like the only thing that's constant is change, or the only thing that's guaranteed is that nothing's going to stay the same, or there's things are going to change, or however you want to put it, more eloquently or less eloquently. But yeah, and so it's good to just be more dynamic and fluid. And then you can also see that in a generational thing. Like, back before we had instant communication, at a moment's notice, we could share a thought with someone, that with just about anyone we want to, in a multitude of ways. You got to imagine that people lived like that for, well, ever up until like 20 years ago, or however long it is. Not 20. It's like, I'm trying to think. back in the late 90s. No, say it wasn't until the early 2000s that my family didn't get cell phones. I had a cell phone in middle school. But anyways, that was about the time when you could share like a simple idea with anyone. Now we've actually perfected it. So I'd actually say, the moment that we started having internet browsers on our cell phones was probably the time. So very recently, where it was like efficient enough for everybody to have it, where enough people were trained how to use it. And I feel like it's actually kind of an interesting thought. Like a lot of the world is still learning how to use this tech, be it the older generations or places that might not have been wealthy enough to have it in the past. But then at the same time, like now, we've been so good about spreading technology around, and we're getting better too. Doing one of my side projects where refurbishing laptops, old work laptops, and giving them out. It's awesome. And I'm being really careful not to try to like toot my horn about it because like it has to be proper. I mean, I don't care to ever be famous about it. In fact, I hope I'm not. This kind of sounds annoying, but the idea of hooking up people, well, not hooking up, getting laptops, distributing them to people that, maybe they can't really afford one, or at least like a newer one, or maybe it's just, it would be a really, I'm trying to phrase this good because it's not really so much charity. It's more like common sense. Like nobody can really afford a laptop on top of the cost of college education, and like at the same time, paying bills and learning how the world works and everything, gap years, all that. So no, free computers. Wow, I just went on a very incoherent rant there. Sorry. Let me back up. Computers really should be available to everyone. And, back in my day, it was public libraries if you didn't have a personal computer, which isn't, the end of the world. It's like libraries are fine in that regard. Um, oh, but anyways, things are getting better. And as we increase internet connectivity around the world, and access to computers, the hold on, I gotta do this because otherwise I'm just gonna. It's easier to tell when I'm done harvesting if I do this. But, anyways, like there. So, um, yeah, because really it's the spread of knowledge, the efficient spread of knowledge that we're going for currently. I mean, we figured out that now we can share ideas instantly across the world to anyone, intentional or unintentional. And that's like the basis of cybersecurity is the unintentional sharing of information to certain parties. But is a very, layman's terms way to describe, well, actually the majority of computer science. It's confidentiality, integrity, and authentication. CIA triad or account. Anyways, the focuses of cybersecurity and why it's so popular is because data is so important when it is, and then it's also so important in other ways when it is as well. And by that I mean free information or open source ideologies, which is what Linux is based off of, is the open source community of a bunch of tech gurus that came together and said, you know what, this should be free for everyone. Everybody should have access to computing. And they're right. I mean, everybody should have access to information and processing that information and all that. Granted, we're still a capitalistic society, and it's really not sustainable to just give everything away for free. So that's why, a lot of people are in a gray area where it's like, yeah, open source is great and I'll do it when I can. But at the same time, a lot of tech professionals respect the need for business, the business side of it. Granted, you have people like me out here trying to come up with tutorials. A lot of people, by the way, I've been connecting with some more on Twitter lately, but like, content creators, people trying to help others, especially people that have experienced it, what it is to get like a computer science degree and start working in tech, or anybody that, lived in the world. Oh, so now I'm trying not to sound pompous like, a youngster that's taking it for granted. But basically, IT and software and everything tech was so much harder before computers were so prevalent. And, the internet was originally designed to link campuses together, or, different educational buildings so they could, I believe it was college campuses. But anyways, it could have also just been a business, but it was meant to network a couple of buildings together so they could share information between a couple buildings. And now, you can hear my nonsense anywhere in the world if you have a subscription to YouTube. But I digress. It's just that's how far we've come. If I had a scientific breakthrough in building A, I would have to hope that the network worked to transmit that data or transmit that information over to building B, so person whoever could even use it. So, but now we come up with then, as I say that, there is a problem with saturation of poor content, I guess. I don't know. I mean, the heart wants what it wants, and there's some pretty entertaining videos out there that make absolutely no sense, and I find myself laughing my head off at them. So, you know what? But that's actually part of the meaning of life. In my opinion, 42, it's the asterisk, it's everything. So, I mean, go out there, laugh at a cat video, but you got to pay the bills at the end of the day, so it's good to learn tech and how to work with tech and how to help people with tech. And then that gets right back into full circle as to why you know, everything can't be open source. So until we fix the other problems where, why do we even need currency in a future day and age where if everybody just had, not just their needs met, but had access to all sorts of the other stuff? I mean, I don't know. I feel like the goal is a society where as long as you put in the effort, whatever you're doing, your function, your contribution, kind of like a Star Trek era. Ooh, I haven't said that in quite a while. Probably for good reason. But anyways, the idea behind a Star Trek era is like where everybody just contributes. I don't think they have currency in that show. It's been a while since I've seen an episode. And I didn't get really super into it, but it was a great show. All my focus was spent on other things, I suppose. I don't know, but because even now I don't go back and like watch them. Like, I mean, to be honest, well, I digress. But the point of that is a society where it's more of a communal society, and just people learn for the sake of being more useful to the fleet, the crew. Like, they learn engineering so they can power these like fancy spaceships, doing all this stuff and all the potential of humanity. And it gets that open source mentality where it's for the good of humankind. So, I don't know. Way off on a tangent there. I really just meant to talk about dynamic and the importance of it. So, anyways, let's see. I also haven't been in here for a while, and I'm trying to make these a little bit shorter. That's why I was checking the time, because it's like, yeah, musing for a good hour is great, but really I should be chopping these up, and maybe I don't know, still experimenting with all this stuff. But even watching my own stuff after, it's like, I lose interest after like 20 minutes. So, yeah, dynamic. To wrap it all up, sorry, I was also thinking what I could do in here, but um, dynamic. Be willing to change in reaction to change. And I'm not saying like, don't stand for something, be just complete pushover for everything and believe everything you hear. That's definitely not like what I'm trying to encourage. But at the same time, if something changes or if your perception of something changes, don't let it have power over you to where it's like debilitating or it enrages you or your emotions, anything like that. And sorry, yeah, that is the important part. And I feel like that's a big problem with society today. And it's kind of dangerous with how fast our communication is because it's really easy to fact check things. But you also got to factor in human pride too. So, nobody wants to be wrong, like especially when the people around you are so quick to like call it out in certain ways. And I'm not saying everyone because this isn't fair, but like, in certain situations, you hanging out with the fellows or the crew or whatever, and then like, it's that mob mentality, or I don't know, like there's situations about it, or that just kind of sounds depressing, but not everybody hangs out in higher education. There you go. That's a good way to put it. So a lot of the circles that I'm used to now aren't necessarily the circles that I had when I was growing up. And so that, without divulging too much, is more just why it's like, or I understand the importance of explaining that because it's not all that obvious to a lot of people. In fact, quite the contrary. People see all this stuff on TV. They hear about statistics of, life out there being hard and people committing crimes or whatever, and then they think, oh, well, that's just all fake. And then it happens in real life and they're like, what? No, and that's part of why, it is such an important task to try to figure out things like preventative blue teaming. Well, yes, my field is cybersecurity, or well, technology in general, I guess I should say, because it's not just cybersecurity, but that's a big part of it. And, and like I've said before, it's all fun and good. You can build all the firewalls, do all the preventative measures all day, but are you really going to ever be done? I mean, yeah, that's good job security, but wouldn't it be nice if we just get to this point where cybersecurity isn't even needed? And, of course, we've got the idea of paradise and the perfect civilization, and then you've got the ideas in the Matrix where it's like, well, the brain couldn't handle paradise, and so we actually had to dial it back a bit and um, come up with a little bit of struggle, and that is our current world now. So, which is kind of creepy because that scalably um, solves the plot holes for the Matrix being real or not. Or it gives it a blank check is another way to think of it, or it leaves it so open ended that yeah, it could be a possibility, and we would never know. Like, oh gosh, that's like religion in a nutshell. It could be a possibility, but we might never know. Like that's kind of phrasing, but wow. Um, yeah, but I digress. So the Matrix and the perfect world and all that. Where was I going with all that? Jeez. No, I mean it's just that's not how far I was really meaning to take it with the idea of being dynamic. Dynamic is you're still rooted in reality, and something unless aliens suddenly reveal themselves or God reveals him or herself if they exist or whatever the case, like maybe like something like that, maybe a once in a lifetime thing, if ever. Like okay, yeah, then that would be a special circumstance. But the majority of the things that I'm referring to, you need to be dynamic about figuring out, oh, a certain tech tool, like you've downloaded this program, it works in this certain way, it can also do this, or, oh, it does this, but it's really not good at this, or there's an error. I mean, we would call a lot of that just bugs in the code, but I mean, and that's why things are constantly updating. That's why it's important to keep things updated because, even after you've released a product, it might, there might be problems that they find. And then they're like, okay, well, let's fix that. I mean, that is software update in a nutshell. Like there's security flaws or hey, there's something we didn't realize we could be doing, so we fixed it. Or, I hate to say it, but maybe the software tool wasn't quite done, but we released it anyway because we got the bottom line to think about. Oh, hold on. Got a drink. Oh, excuse me. Ah, just get so dry talking for so long. That's the other thing. I need to keep these things shorter. Maybe that's just my cue to cut out, but so anyways, the takeaway is be ready to accept that situations or details might have changed. And that's like true with all of life. I mean, still be skeptical of it. And, if it seems suspicious, try to investigate further. Seek out your own investigation. Don't let people spoon feed you their investigation. And that's really important with everything. And I feel like if more people did that or knew how to do that or were empowered to do that or encouraged to do that, because it's not just like if they can. Like that's such a loaded, like and a weighted concept. It's like, of course they can, they're able to, but is it likely that given the amount of time they have and their aptitude at using tech, like are they likely to follow through with a self-investigation or find out for themselves, or are they likely to just accept everything at face value? And not everything too. Like I'm really trying to cut down on usage of absolutes, but now we could go all into that rant or anything, but it's just you don't want to be completely committed to an ideal. Like you need to be able to change your position and be okay with that. Like you can't let pride get in the way because that's the moral of so many, famous movies back in the day, especially a bunch of Adam Sandler stuff is like, pride. Like I'm thinking specifically Shooter McGavin on Happy Gilmore. Like he's just got his pride, his ego. He can't be wrong. And like there's that scene in the bar, and Adam Sandler just totally rips on him, makes him look like an idiot, and he's just like, listen to what I say or something. And then Adam Sandler just starts going off on rhyming with him, mocking him, but basically showing him, taking him down a peg or two because it's not okay to be like that, like so conceited to where you're just kind of annoying to be around. Like nobody wants to be around someone conceited like that, and that's why I feel like all the Adam Sandler movies should be required material, like educational material. Same with Chris Farley, like Tommy Boy. Oh my gosh, now that's some good behavioral molding. Examples of what not to do, what to do, and why it's okay to like I guess that's another thing to point out. Is like a lot of stories have the hero do some character development, right? We say that, but then we don't really realize that that applies to real life as well. Like we are all capable of change, especially, well, maybe not in a 2 hour window, but keep in mind a lot of movies span, just a few weeks, several months. I know Tommy Boy was quite a while, I think. Well, shoot. I mean, it wasn't really relevant or important, so I guess that wasn't really something I paid attention to. But I know it spans an entire lifetime because it starts off with Tommy as a kid and showing that how his behavior and stuff didn't change until he got out of college. And even, certain things never change. So I guess that's a good example of why absolutes are not necessarily dangerous, but possibly inefficient. And, you got to be careful using them. Try not to say never or never say never, whatever. But now I'm getting into the rhyming thing, thinking about Adam Sandler talking about rhymes. Anyways, so scalability with with the ability to be dynamic. See, I was trying to think of like scalability and dynamic ability. I don't know. I doubt that's a word, but I've been surprised before. Anyways, you can't truly have scalability to where you can think and account for all the different situations possible without being a little dynamic. Like, in fact, okay, so that's a really good point. When you're first starting out coding and you're learning to do simple challenges, and then you get asked to do like a bigger challenge, and then it's like, I'm thinking of a specific example of one I just did a couple years ago, or a few years ago, I guess now, but it was a formatting thing. And based on some data input, I needed to format an output. And they had a few different parameters, a few rules to it. And basically, I went from having like 4 pages of code because, trying to think. So I used a slick way to format the text or the output based on a few items in a list. And basically it was like separate them by commas, but also and at the end. And then that's like the typical one. And they took it even a step further. I'm trying to remember exactly how they did that, but they made a requirement to where you didn't have a comma after the last one or something silly like that, but it still made sense. Oh, plural. Plural. If it was more than one day, month, week, year, that's what it was. It was put out the days, the months, the years, and if it was plural, you had to add an S at the end. And that was the thing. And so, that led to all sorts of potential of like, okay, we're going to analyze the program in the beginning to see like, okay, well, if it's more than one, add an S. And that's what made my code so long because I was hard coding it. Oh, that's what it was. And I think I wasn't even using a list all that well, like at first, my first attempt. And I didn't even finish too. Like by the time I was on like page 4 of code, I realized how I could make it much more efficient. In fact, I'm gonna see if I can't post that code in the comments of this because that is a great example of, oh, shoot. I don't know if I saved it because I have my final code, like the shortened code. And you could imagine what it would be like if um, I don't really want to type out 4 pages of code. I know I could kind of piece it together, but I don't know. Maybe I could just fill 4 pages with code and then show you like an example of what it would be. But anyways, the moral of the story is like scalability and being able to be dynamic is very useful in the world of tech and the rest of the world. So that was actually pretty good though. I went from quite the wandering to had a couple of semblances of good ideas. Also, this axe needs to be repaired. Actually, what are we doing? Whatever, it's not even half an hour yet. Let's keep going. So, although I do want to get some more pumpkins and melons because I gotta heal up this axe. Yeah, that's right. I did put them all over there. And that's what I call a little technique I call close enough. So when I'm trying to get half and half, and clearly already I can see, reminds me of a Mario Party round where you actually have to guess which shape is bigger. I have more pumpkins, but whatever, it's close enough. And I have more down there. So already, that's kind of more of a dynamic way of thinking instead of like counting up exactly how many. And I even have a stack of cacti. I just noticed that. But right there, that's a way of like showing like everyday thinking. I mean, I already know that there's there's more stuff over here if I need it, and that's why that's by design. By design, as I set it up like that to where I'd have a whole bunch over here, and I try to like move some over when I can. Their prices are back to somewhat normal. But yeah, and that's a very vague kind of analysis of using the idea of being dynamic and the idea of scalability in the real world. Like with code, it's really easy to point out. I mean, I think we talked about, well, I was just talking about this in the Bloodborne musings, how you could do the grading program where it's like you got to find, return a letter grade based on a numerical grade input. And, the hard coding way would be like, did the student get a 100, output an A? Did the student get a 99, output an A? All the way down to 0. Just because that's every single possibility on a regular test scored from 0 to 100. Of course, that's not even a good standard because, many tests, they have different aspects. Like most tests, it's really like the point values don't add up to be perfect like that. So like if it's only even amounts of points, you can only have an even score. Anyways, so that's not entirely exactly correct. Like, so explicitly. But anyways, wow, and that went way down a rabbit hole. See, there we go. We tied back rabbit holes. Axe is pretty good. Let's see. Do I even have any more? Yeah, whatever. We have plenty of stuff. What we can also do is buy. I've been buying like cakes and stuff, just like because you still get the experience. It's a waste of emeralds, and I'm trying to save up emeralds, but at the same time, I have so many melons and everything. It really doesn't matter. I'd rather just get this all healed up. Yeah, close enough. So, but anyways, yeah. So you got to be careful. I mean, to be like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Yeah, see, I'm really needing my diamonds. Trying to be all flashy with making the tunnel, but anyways, no. So you don't want to be like a complete robot and think about scalability and like young Sheldon comes to mind. The way that he acts, of course it's supposed to be satire, but there's times that people might get into that, like not even meaning to. They might just like point out the logic of something, and that's kind of like the story of quite a bit. Like you think about like Back to the Future or any of the other movie franchises where it's like the nerd gets picked on when they're really just trying to point out what's obvious to some people but not quite obvious to others, and then they get offended and they get upset. And luckily, I think that's a lot less and less nowadays. I mean, bullying, I don't know. Like, I definitely think it's still, a major thing. You talk about all this stuff. But to the degree of like people dreaded a fight after school for like days, or I don't know. I just, well, I think it's kind of evolved actually now that I say that, because I've seen videos of like school fights and it's like the fights still happen. It's just, I don't know. I think it might even be more instantaneous with like the spread of bad information, either misinformation or just kind of condemning news. Like you see your boyfriend or girlfriend out with someone else and you get caught and then you fight that other someone else or whatever. I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons kids fight. See, I don't know. But we went way down another rabbit hole, which, yeah, whenever I say I digress, that's me realizing that I've been talking about something for probably a little too long, and then I kind of pull it back. But, and I'm so on the fence about all of that. Like, yeah, I really got a lot of other things I should be doing. But, anyways, I just wanted to jump on. I had some thoughts about the idea of dynamic, and when you're coding, like, there's a whole thing in Java with like either a static or dynamic variables. Methods can be declared as static, and that's why I almost want to go look it up now because I don't want to say that, and don't like take my word for that. That static means unchanging, but Well, I could do that. I've got internet in my pocket. So bear with me. Okay. Yeah, lacking in movement, action, or change, especially in a way viewed as undesirable or uninteresting. Huh. Concerned with bodies at rest or forces in equilibrium, crackling or hissing. Yeah, that's like the phone static. So yeah, lacking in movement, so unchanging. Now, as far as like computer science, let's see. Static meaning Java. In the Java programming language, the keyword static means that the particular member belongs to the type itself rather than to an instance of that type. Huh. So, I don't know. This is where Java gets kind of complicated, but like, so static variable. So I wouldn't necessarily mean that it's like unchanging. I mean, and that's the whole idea of a variable is that it changes. It's variable. It varies, or it has the potential to variable. Although I say that, but now that I think about it, that's really not accurate because in your program, you don't want your variable to change all that much unless it's supposed to. And by that I mean, a lot of times when you declare a variable and set it, you want it to be that. That's why you have it saved as that. Um, but then there are times where you want it to be able to change or yeah, or to store a result that varies into a variable. Anyways, yeah, talk about rabbit holes. But yeah, so static belongs to a type itself rather than an instance of that type. Like it's like halfway there to making sense. And my voice just cracked. It's like halfway to making sense to me. Anyways, I say dynamic a lot when I'm explaining tech issues in the world of IT, just because, I mean, if you want something to stay the same or if you want it to change, you want it to be described as being dynamic or just solid or unchanging. So, anyways, and I think we actually say static, but there is the static keyword in Java programming that, as we learned, it means something, but I don't know. That's just pretty bad. If I had to sit down and figure it out, I could. But it's like an instance of itself, like you could be an object of a certain class. But even that, I'm still trying to figure out like why I would say, I don't know, like a fish object is also an animal object or inherits, and like you could do that, but I don't think that's even where it's going with that because the instance of itself or oh, nah, that could be like a variation. Like if it's just the base one versus a copy of it or a remake of it or a variation or a dynamically changed alteration. I don't know. I would have to look at and see. The other thing is knowing the splitting hairs with that type of level of programming insight is really more for like when you're dealing with very specific situations, and that's why you get paid the big bucks to be a programmer. Like most of the time, you just declare it as static. Like that's what we did for basically everything. And there was more times that if we needed it to be otherwise, and see, I don't even know what the otherwise is. We just always said, because I don't think it was like public dynamic anything. It was just public static or just public void. Like we either had the keyword or not, I feel like. And even that, yeah, so I'd have to like actually play with it and see like a specific example and dive in. But I definitely don't program in Java anymore because I'm lazy. And I also don't program all that much anymore. Not for my work. I do it for education stuff, but I also haven't made a coding video in quite a while. So if I were to go back to doing some actual code, which I'm planning on doing some Scratch videos here soon, just to kind of show the tutorials and stuff, just because they're fun too, and it shows like programming logic, really simple ways. Like you learn like order of not so much order of operations, but the order of the the code. I guess it is kind of like order of operations, just not in like the mathematical sense. We're not doing PEMDAS, but it's Yeah, synchronization. There you go. Specifically thinking of one example where I'm timing dialogue between two characters, and you have to do a wait block, and you have to like kind of play it a few times, see like how long each sound is. Yeah, but anyways, if I'm gonna do that, my point being is I would brush up on the code beforehand and definitely make sure I was familiar with what I was going to talk about. So, i.e., the scratch things, I already have been playing with it quite a bit, and it's like I know what I'm going to talk about, and I'll be able to explain it a little better. With Java, which I probably will still do again. I mean, I need to remake those old videos because they're very poor quality, and even this one, like I don't know if I like how the mic sounds on this, so I might have to even re-record things with a better headset, better setup. But I don't know. At the end of the day, you got to remember the majority of the world up until like I don't know, check my watch, like the last 5 years, well, up until COVID. That's actually a really good point. Like up until the time of COVID, we all learned computer science in the lecture hall. We also learned all the science and math, like leading up to it, in lecture halls, or and then even before that, dragged out through many more years of public education because you got to remember, what kids are learning today is way more advanced than what even kids my age learned in school. And even my parents' generation, like the youngest generation has it so easy with how far communication technology has come to where they're learning math way early on, science. It's making sense to more people. And I think that's also the other really neat thing and why I need to make sure that I make every one of these things into like a shorts, which I already know, but whenever I try to make a short video, it ends up being like an hour like this. But anyways, I'm working on that. I kind of ramble a lot in real life too. But anywho, actually, that would be a good place to end the video right there. Um, yeah, so all right, that's a good Minecraft using. Uh, I wish I didn't have the awkward pauses and everything. Like I feel like there's so much more too, but then like I get distracted in this playing. Maybe that's why Bloodborne is a little easier to do with this stuff because it's like just mindless. Like I remember where things are, but I know even saying that I get distracted over there too. So, anyways, that's a good one. We'll upload it. Why not? And I'm planning on picking apart these things later too. So apologies and thank you for ever sticking around for these long ones. But at the same time, I'm probably going to come out with much more easier to consume bite-sized pieces, or people can remake it too. Be like, that might even be a chore I have certain people do. But anyways, wow, that just sounded like a Fight Club thing. Like I got people working for me. Anyways, it's not like that, but um, there is some kind of tutorial stuff going on. So we'll just leave it at that. Anyways, I will see you all later. Let's end it cryptically too. All right. Bye, everybody.